Hello and welcome to everybody on Cloud Fitness. So in today's video of Python series, I'm going to talk about Lambda functions in Python. I'm going to tell you what exactly a Lambda function is, why do we use Lambda function, why does Lambda function is so handy, and how do we actually use it. So let's go ahead and see exactly what a Lambda function is, and I'll go to my PyCharm editor. And remember that in the previous video I talked about doc strings, right? So there I kind of forgot to explain you one thing, right, which I wanted to cover in this video itself before starting the Lambda function. So if you see over here, this is what we discussed, right? In a function, whenever we write a doc string, which basically helps us to understand what a function does, right? We write it in a double quote, or we write it in triple double quotes or triple single quotes. So this is nothing but this is a doc string. Now if you want to understand what is a doc string for a particular function, there is you can directly use the function name dot underscore underscore doc underscore underscore, and this statement will actually tell you what is the doc string, right? What is the doc string? So it will actually, when it runs the function, it will also tell you what is the doc string, right? So for example, let me in fact comment this particular line as well. Let me now your function is not running. Okay, now just to get the doc string, now if I run this, you will see that it gave you doc string. This function takes key comma values as input. Now this is the doc string, right? So this function name dot underscore underscore doc underscore underscore, this actually helps you to show what is a doc string for that particular function. So I hope you understood this. Now we will proceed with the today's topic, which is nothing but the Lambda function. So let me write lambda.py file over here. Now in this lambda.py file, I'm going to explain you what is a Lambda function. So Lambda function is nothing but it is a one-liner function, right? So Lambda, so usually you have already seen how does functions work, right? So you have already seen what are function, why do we use functions, right? You use a def keyword and then you write a function. You can pass n number of arguments, right? You can pass n number of arguments to that particular function. You can perform a set of statements inside that particular function, right? But Lambda function is no namer function. It is also called as anonymous function because it has no name, right? The name itself is a Lambda function and it is a one-liner function. Within one line itself, right, you have to write the function. It can take up n number of arguments. You can give it n number of arguments, but it will only have one expression. So limited, in the other sense, you can also say a limited version of a function. A one-liner function is called a Lambda function, which can take n number of arguments, but it can have only one expression. So for example, let me say multiply. So let's say I want to see the multiplication of two numbers. I can do it using the function also, right? Using the def function as well, but I'll show you how to do it using Lambda. Now to do that, this is the syntax, right? LAMBDA, right? So this is nothing but the Lambda keyword used to create a Lambda function. So the moment you write this, you have started writing Lambda function. So whatever the input it takes, so let's say it takes input x comma y, so this becomes the input, and what is the output? Output is given after colon. Output, let's say x star y, right? So this is the function itself. Now this multiply, what is this multiply? This is a one-liner function. Now how do we call a function in general? We just say function name. In the similar way, you will also write your function name, and within within these parentheses you will write the input variable. So let's say your input variable is 5 comma 5, right? So this is how you are going to call the function, right? This is how you are actually going to call this function also. So let me directly print what is there and run it. So now you will see 25 will come as an output. See, this is 25. So this is nothing but your Lambda function. It can take n number of inputs, but it has only one expression. So this is just a one expression. You can do anything with that. So let's say instead of this, I write star, again I write 2. So it is still one function, right? It is still one expression, right? Now again I run it, you got the answer as 50. Now similarly, the same thing you could have done it through function as well. The same thing you could have done, you can do through Lambda. So there is no specific rule that you can not use Lambda, right? There is no specific use, but for a few use cases it is very handy when you have to do a short a transformation and you don't want to write a function to it. You can go ahead and write Lambda function if it is possible to write your logic in one expression that you want. Right now, similarly, can you use Lambda function inside a function? So let me write a function that we discussed earlier. So let me say it as function 01. Right now, let me say that this function 01, let's say it takes a input x comma y. Right, these are the input variables that it takes, and then it returns, let me say it returns lambda x comma y. Right, it takes, now this lambda function is what it is returning, right, colon, and what it is returning, it is taking x comma y as an input. This lambda function is taking x comma y as an input, and then it is saying x, let's say plus y. I'm just randomly writing, okay, this logic. Right now I can simply call my function 01. I can say function 01, let me say again 5 comma 5, and let me comment the previous part, and let me simply run this. Right, so now in fact let me print this value as well, so that you can actually see the output also. So what has happened over here, I'm using the lambda function inside a function. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Now remember that the output over here, right, the moment I wrote print, right, what did it tell me? Right, that it told me that the output of this, right, output of this particular function is a lambda function in itself. So if you see over here, so the moment I wrote print, it showed that a function 01 locals lambda. What does it mean? It is telling me that the output, the return value of this function is a lambda function. It is telling me that. Now it is not returning me a value, right? It is not returning me a value, it is returning me a lambda function. Remember that is the difference. Now what I can do is, now since it is a lambda function, what I can do, right, I can actually assign the value of this particular function, right, I can assign this particular value to a variable, let's say t. I can assign the value, right, because what this particular function is doing, right, it is returning me a lambda. Now this lambda, I'm assigning it to t. Right, I'm assigning this lambda to t. Now what does it mean? Now this t becomes this lambda function. Right, now what will happen over here? Now again if I try to print t, it is nothing but it is lambda. Okay, now let me try to run it. Now again the moment I ran it, you can actually see it is a lambda function. Now since it is a lambda function, it has to get executed. Now how do you execute it? Let me comment this print statement and let me execute it. Now how do you execute this t? Right, t is nothing but the lambda function. Right, how do you execute a function? Function name is t, and what is the value? Let me put in the value, let's say 5 comma 5, because lambda function is expecting x comma y. And now if I try to print it, I will get the value because I'm trying to execute the lambda function. If you did not understand this, right, now you can see it gave 15. Right, so now if you did not understand this, I do recommend watching the same video again. You will definitely understand it. Right, now this is what the lambda function is. Right, here now also remember one more thing, right, x comma y. Now if I say y is equal to 7, right, now if I say y is equal to 7, then what will happen? Right, now even if you do not provide the second value over here, right, still this is going to work. Even if you do not provide this value over here, still it is going to work. I'll just remove these two values and I'll run it. This will not give any error directly. Now if you see over here, right, what has happened? When I mentioned x and y equal to 7, what happened over here? And I did not put any value of y over here. Now when it went to function 01, function 01 executed without any issue. What happened? It took the value of x as 5 and y it took by default as 7, even if I did not provide it. But why did this error came then? This error came because you had a lambda function over here. Your lambda function is expecting both x and y as the separate value. right? And when you are calling this particular function, it is expecting that you put in this particular value 7 as well, or you put in a value over here. So let me say if I put the value as 0 over here, right? And now if I run it, right, now if I run it, sorry, let me put it over here, comma 0. So now if I run it, you will actually see that it is not going to give any error. Why it did not give any error? Now try to understand this in very detail. So what happened over here? Function 01, I'm calling a function. So while calling a function, what happened? X value is 5, right? Y I have given equal to 7. This means that the default value of y is 7. Now even if I don't provide any value, it is automatically going to take 7 as the value. So this one executed fine. There is no issue with running of this function. You can do that. This is just a functionality that I'm trying to explain you, right? This function executed fine, but then what happened? It returned lambda function, right, as an output. It returned lambda function as t. T is nothing but t is the lambda function which is returned. Now when you try to call this t, right, when you try to call this t, it is expecting x comma y. But what did we do? We just gave 5 over here, right? However, it was expecting two values, x comma y. So that is why it gave error. So now let me rerun it. Now it will give error. Why? Because 5 comma the value I did not provide. But the moment I provide another value over here and I rerun it, it is not going to give any issue. So I hope you understood this. What does it mean, right? And this particular this particular concept, right, where we kind of put a default value. So in case for the function, so in fact let me print comment this part. Now what I can show you over here is, now instead of I have given a default of 7, right? But even after giving default of 7, I have an option whether you don't put this particular 5 over here, right? What it will do, it will by default take the value 7 of y. But if I give a value over here, let's say I give 9, right, what it will happen, it will override the default value and it will take 9 as the value for y, right? So remember that this is just a functionality. I can simply show you this using x plus y, right? Now if I run it, you can actually see, let me check what happened over here. Done and run. So now you can actually see what happened over here. It did a sum, it returned x plus y. Now what is x over here? X is 5, right? Y is 9, 14. What happened over here? Even if you provided a default value of 7, still what it did, it overrided this default value with 9. Now if I don't put 9 and I run it, it will not give any error. It is actually going to give the sum of 5 and 7. So this is about function and the calling of function. But when you talk about the lambda function, right, that you saw just now, lambda function, it is expecting x comma y. So when you are calling this lambda function over here, right, you have to provide both the values x and y. You cannot skip it, right? You cannot skip that particular value. You have to provide it. In this case, what you did, you can provide a default value over here, right? But now the other question you might ask is, right, Bhavna, what if I can put y equal to 7 here, right? And now let me comment this line and let me uncomment these lines, right? Let me uncomment these lines over here. Now if you see technically, again I am only providing one value over here, but the lambda value that is returned, right, the lambda value that is returned over here, what it is doing, it is giving you x and it is giving you default value of y also, right? So now if you see this t, what is this t? This t is giving you in return this lambda function. What does this lambda function has? This lambda function has the x and it has y equal to 7, and then it is this output that this lambda function has. Now if I try to print, or if I try to print the call of this lambda function, when I am calling this lambda function, I am passing in only one value, which is 5, right? So x becomes 5, y becomes 7, and then this is how you got the output as 19. Now here let me try to put 0 as the input. Now if I run it, you can actually see 7 into 2, you got 14 as the output. Now here let me try to put 0 comma 0. Now let's see what will happen. Now here again it will override, and you will get the 0 as an output. So basically the functionality of both normal function and the lambda function is same, right? Just that you can only write one liner transformation within the lambda function, but in case of normal function you can write, it need not to be just a one liner expression. That is the difference. You can, wherever you are comfortable, you can go ahead and use lambda function as well. Now in case you did not understand this concept, try watching the same video again. So probably it will become easier for you to understand the moment you rewatch it. So thank you so much for being till here, and do remember to like, share and subscribe to my channel.